Uh-huh. Every time. Yep. All right. First of all, give two names for the plane. When we're trying to name a plane, we're going to look for a capital letter like R that's hanging out by itself. We can call this then plane capital R. Make sure it looks like it. Like one of the things I was saying during the review is that sometimes people were writing like, don't write a lowercase letter because that's just how you write. Make sure it looks capital. Now, the other way we can name this plane, besides a single letter without a dot, if we take a single letter without a dot, that's the name of the plane, or we choose 3 points that are in the plane and write them without separation. Now, the points that are in this plane are either A, B, C, D, or E. So we have the collection of points, A, B, C, D, or E, and all you got to do is put 3 of them together. No commas. See what I mean? Just grab 3 of those points. So to name the plane, you'd put 3 of these together, and that would be another way to name it. No commas between, and I'm not writing them all, B, C, D, B, C, A. You could do it a whole bunch of different ways. No commas between, but it's 3 of those 5 points to give it a name. Now, when we look at the second one, what questions do you have about this one? I'm just clarifying how this is all going to go. Second one, name 3 collinear points. When I go and try to line up collinear points here, what I'm looking at for collinear, you guys, is I'm going to go grab, there's one line that I see 3 points on. It's this one right here. So for number 2, A, comma, B, comma, C. People were like, you marked it wrong because I didn't put commas? Yeah, because it's talking about me giving 3 points, and if I just put it as A, B, C, that's how we name a plane. So you gotta make sure that when you're asked for points, you're separating it with commas. Okay, when you're asked for points, you're separating it with commas. 3 points together makes me think it's a plane name. Now, number 3, give me 3 coplanar points. Well, I had that list on my other part of my paper. A, B, C, D, or E. Any of these 3. Any of these 3. They all lie in the same plane. Now, you guys will notice that what are the couple things on the drawing that I didn't include? I did not include the capital R, that's not a point. And I didn't include the lowercase l, that doesn't have anything to do with the plane, it has to do with the name for that line. So any of those 3 for number 3.
You gotta put commas for number 3 too?
You do. If you're naming points, separate them by commas. Now, number 4 is simple as name 3 points. Guess what? Same thing. Any of those 3. Separate them by commas. Any of those 3, separate them by commas. It's not on a line, but it's sitting on the flat surface. It's not part of that line AB or that segment BD, but it's sitting on that flat surface. KJ, go ahead.
So number 4, all we have to do is just
Any 3 of those, yeah.
what was number 4 question separate?
Number 4 says name 3 points. Number 3 says name 3 coplanar points. Well, there's the coplanar points. Guess what? Those are all the points that you can use to name it, to name 3 points in general too.
Basically the same thing.
Yeah. Naming, and like that's what I mean, like making sure you're writing it correctly. Now we go through to number 5, and this is where you guys started kind of blowing it. Not everybody, but for the most part. Whenever we're looking for array has one endpoint and an arrow. And I'm starting out with that because that's the notation that has to go across it. When I see that above 2 letters, I read that as ray. That's what I'm talking about with your notation. Now, array has an endpoint and goes on and on. How about from B to C? If I just ignore the other part of this line, ray BC exists.
Ray AB.
I could go and ignore this part of the line.
What about AC?
Hold on a sec. Oh, I can get that one too. I could actually, I heard AB. Sure, I could do AB and just assume it keeps going. Could I do AC? Sure.
That was both sides.
Oopsie. Nope. If I write it like this, I'm saying consider A to be the endpoint. If I write it like this, consider A to be the endpoint.
When would it be both sides?
When it's a line.
You said it for it?
So like,
Hold on a second. Let me finish this up.
the BD would be a line. Right? That would be
All right. Or rays. Any other rays you guys have?
BA.
BA. Sure. BA going out that way.
You put it.
CD.
Could CB. Yep. You could do CB, C to B and beyond. Sure. Now, that you just had to have one of those. Those are all possibilities for rays. How do I know they're all rays? My notation on the top. Number 6 says name 2 lines. Here you go, Tyrell. First of all, I absolutely would have expected you to grab and tell me that line lowercase l was actually going through the plane, but that's a line. This line L is meant to be like, okay, imagine it going through the top of the plane and going underneath. The dashed lines under are showing it's going under. That's one. The other line that we can talk about, we've just been beating it all up, making it into rays, line AB, or I could call that line BC, or I could call that line AC. I would expect you to have named this one and use one of these to name the other one. Michaela, go ahead. If there was a highlight over the top of it, it meant that I didn't see your line notation. That was the big thing for most people, is just the notation was somehow wrong. Go ahead, Taylor.
I did AC and I had notation on the top of it. You still
I will look at that with you because I remember thinking something was a little odd, but let me finish this and we'll look together. So that's how we name lines. 2 letters with 2 arrowheads, or one single lowercase letter is meant to name the line. Just like a single uppercase letter is meant to name a plane.
So why does AB have both arrows?
Because I'm trying to show that I'm talking about the entire line that goes through A and B and on in both sides. Doesn't matter that it hits C too.
Why is DB not on?
DB doesn't have any arrowheads going on and on. It doesn't, it's not part of something. Now actually DB would be the answer to number 7. Could be an answer to number 7, because that's a segment.
Those are all right. AB, C.
One of those 3 and line L should be there. Now for number 7, name one line segment. You just pointed one out for me. DB. But I could also go in, 1 second, Steve, and I could just consider ignoring other parts of the line. I could call AB a segment. I could call BC a segment. I could call AC a segment. So these are all possibilities. What did I say? AB, BC, AC. Why would I put arrows when there's not arrows on a segment? Segments have endpoints, okay? And that was all the first 2 pages of our notes packets. We wrote all about that and put all kinds of examples of them. Segments don't have arrows. They're defined by having 2 endpoints.
So which is not a line segment?
AB.
When I call it line AB, line BC. A segment, I just have to say, ignore anything going on to the left and right of it, or up, down, or whatever it is. End it there and talk about it just as a part of the line, part of the line, part of the line. If I put a highlight over the top, it's because you didn't put notation there. That you didn't put the segment notation over the top. That's why it would be marked. I was looking for the notation. Now, when it came to this problem right here, you guys, this was ray AB. And absolutely on your test, it's going to be obvious. I think I had shown you that in class. But this is ray AB and line AC. And the thing that I looked for the most on this problem was they both share a point. Both of them better hit the same A. So ray AB, there's that. And line AC, I just need to make sure it goes through the A and has a C on it. I was pretty generous with this. I was really simply looking for, do you have them both intersecting at A? If A is in both of their names, then I should see them touching there. I gotta move this along a little bit. Number 9, plane C and plane D. Thinking about number 9, I don't know if I can put this on my video, but maybe I'll try.
Why does A have an arrow pointing with?
What do you mean? Underneath it?
Yeah.
I put the arrow underneath to show that they are common to the 2, and they needed to touch there. Maybe I should have highlighted them instead of put an arrow. We're using arrows for everything else. With this being part of both of them, I had to make sure that they touched there. Thank you for asking that. Now this plane C and D intersecting at line XY, if I think about like how you guys watch me use note cards, like here's plane, I don't know if you can see this, I'll do it up here first. Plane C, plane D, just have the edges touch. Plane C, plane D. Now it's not the easiest thing to draw, but we've had some practice. I'm going to do one plane kind of standing up in the back, C. And let me sort of make this one look like it's folded down, D. And then that place where they intersect, there's my line XY. I do not have you drawing planes on your test. Now these ones on the bottom, if you guys have markers now, then I would suggest doing this on your test too. When it says find BD, we'll go highlight. What is BD? In the case of number 10, it's the whole thing. If BD is the whole thing, then I'm going to add together the two parts. 21 plus 7, BD's 28 for that one. Now in number 10 or number 11 though, BD is a part. So when I highlight BD here, I'm like, ooh, that's just a missing part. How do I handle missing parts? Take the whole thing minus the part that's given. That should bring us down to 56. The entire thing minus the given part should bring us to 56. Going on to the back side of this, one of the biggest problems was 12 was this whole idea of naming a segment bisector. A lot of you guys had that highlighted. When you name the segment bisector of something, a segment bisector is defined as the point line or point line plane, ray, or segment that hits a segment at its midpoint. So what is the segment bisector? Line lowercase l. I had to just name it. Now, finding QR. Well, Q to M and M to R are congruent, so that means I can set these expressions 2x plus 6 and 5x minus 9 equal to each other. If that's the midpoint and that's splitting it up, the next thing I have to do is find the length of QR, so I'm going to need an x to do that. I'm going to subtract 2 x's from both sides first. There's different ways you could solve this. Start it out. You should still get the same answer I do. I'm going to add 9 to both sides next. 15 is 3 x's. When I divide by 3, I find out that x is 5. I just can't stop there. I've got to go back in now. 2 times 5 plus 6. That's going to be 16. 5 times 5 minus 9, that's going to be 16. If you did your x right, they should wind up being the same value on either side. So then how long is the whole length of QR?
32.
You got it. Now, we didn't do this problem number 13 on distance when we had the quiz. I hadn't taught it to you guys yet, but we can do it. Distance between these two, let's put it right on our paper here as practice. S is at -5, -2. T is at -3 and 4. We've got to ask the questions, ask and answer the questions. How far apart are the X's? How far apart are the Y's? -5 and -3 are 2 units apart. And 4 and -2 are, 4 minus -2 would be 6 units apart. So then how long is S to T? It's the square root of 2 squared plus 6 squared. That's going to be 4 plus 36 under the radical. It's the square root of 40. ST equals the square root of 40. And if you approximate it, if I remember right, I think it's 6.32. Now, last couple of things here, and again, this was not a quiz question you had to do, but now we have the skills to do it, so we might as well put it on there. Now, at number 14, 14, what are the endpoints of, or the endpoints of QR are 1, 6 and set -7, 3. Now, I'm reasonably certain that this QR is going to be sitting some way diagonally, because if it wasn't, I wouldn't be having to find out mathematically what the midpoint is. I want you guys to go and drop a little drawing up here. Q is sitting over here at 1 and 6. R is sitting over here at -7 and 3. Now, you're going to see in a minute when I go on through 14 and then into 15 why I'm saying this drawing is important. The midpoint values come from, if I want to get the X value of the midpoint, that X value of the midpoint is going to be equal to the average of the 2 X values of the endpoints. So I've got 1 plus -7 divided by 2. Average the X values of the 2 endpoints. That's going to give me a negative 6 over 2 up top. The x value of the midpoint is going to be negative 3. Now I have to go in and say, okay, I've got my x value of the midpoint. Now let's go figure out what the y value of the midpoint is. Y is going to be the average of the y's, 6 and 3 divided by 2. 9 over 2 is 4.5. So the y value of the midpoint is 4.5. Your end answer, midpoint, is negative 3 and 4.5. Now, the reason I set that one up with the line like I did, just showing what we had and what we're given, is because when we get down here on number 15, I think a lot of people just missed this because you just sort of looked at the numbers and didn't think about the setup. It says the midpoint of segment GH is M is 4, negative 3. So I go, all right, there's G, there's H. It gives me the midpoint value, and the midpoint is sitting at 4, negative 3. They go on and say one endpoint is negative 2, 2. G is negative 2, 2. What's H? So here's the question now, is what's this other endpoint if this is the midpoint? Now, since I know what the midpoint is, when I start looking for the average, the fact is the average of the x values is 4. I'm just missing one of them. So 4 is the average of negative 2 plus what x when divided by 2. The midpoint x value is equal to the average of the two x's, and I'm missing 1. How do I undo divide by 2? I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides. When I multiply by 2 on both sides, I get 8 equals, the 2 cancels out, negative 2 plus x. I finish by adding 2 to both sides. 10 is my x. That's this number here, this other endpoint. And let's go back and think about it. What's negative 2 plus 10? Negative 8. I'm sorry, positive 8. When I divide it by 2, it averages to 4. I was trying to figure out what that missing value was. Now I'm going to do the same kind of thing. My y value of the midpoint is negative 3. That comes from the average of 2 plus this missing y, 2 plus this missing y divided by 2, the average of them. Multiply both sides by 2 to undo that divide by 2. Negative 6 equals 2 plus y. I take 2 away from both sides. Y is negative 8. The other missing value is negative 8. My missing endpoint is 10, negative 8.
Good morning, South Lake. This is just a reminder for advice.